Sally is a retired financial advisor with a CFP certification, now living in Prescott, Arizona. She earned her bachelor's degree in accounting from Western Illinois University, and her passion now is volunteering with organizations that are making a difference in the lives of young people and in their education. She's a longtime member of PEO supporting women's education and is a volunteer with MapForce in Prescott, working toward a brighter future by building healthier communities, striving to eliminate substance abuse and its effects. She serves as the headquarters for momsstrong.org in Arizona, a group of moms unmasking the charade of marijuana. She also volunteers for Citizens Against Legalizing Marijuana, a national organization dedicated to providing the latest information on the harms of marijuana, and the Marijuana Victims Alliance as well. Sally's a proud mother of two. She calls her daughter the light of my life. Her son Andy died in 2014. Andy's death is linked to marijuana addiction. He left a powerful message that Sally wants everyone to know. Andy said, and I quote, "Marijuana killed my soul and ruined my brain." And Sally says, quote, "I am now working with Andy in his memory, urging young people to not risk using marijuana or other drugs. Marijuana is not harmless. I hope Andy's message will help everyone think again before assuming the drug marijuana is harmless." Please join me in welcoming Sally Schindel.
See, I asked them to move the computer down there so I can see over the podium. I'm vertically challenged. I didn't know that the bishop would have that, the children tie in, and that's perfect for what I want to talk about. Because the reason I am here today is that we have too many parents losing too many children. I call my work helping Andy help others. Andy loved to help others. He was so good to his friends and his family. And I brought Andy here with me today. I brought him, can't walk away from this. I brought him here in my heart. He's always in my heart. I brought him here, his dog tags. Whenever I speak, I wear his dog tags, and I know he's here with us. Andy died, as you know, in 2014. And the suicide note that was left just left me not understanding. I'm a child of the 60s. I went to college in the 60s and the 70s. I was no stranger to marijuana, but it was the plant marijuana. It was the Woodstock marijuana. I had no clue, no idea what today's marijuana was. He told me just shortly before he died, he'd been through about 5 years of some escalating serious mental illness. And he told me toward the end it was marijuana, and I didn't understand that. I didn't think marijuana was addictive. What I learned afterwards, as you know, is I was very wrong. Grief is an interesting process. And I realized shortly after Andy's death, where I was trying to understand grief, I understood that I'd been grieving for quite some time because my son was sick with a substance use disorder. My son was sick with serious mental illness, and there's a lot of grieving that goes on through that. The little picture there shows, there are a lot of steps, but they don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you get to the end and you help others, which is what that says, is you're looking for that end where you can help others with the message through the grief that you've experienced. The experience is all over the place, and I'm still 5.5 years later after Andy's death. I'm all over the place. Every day I may be in and out of most of these stages. Anger is one, and I know in a room like this with the people that have an interest in a topic like this, I know probably some of you have the experience of a substance use disorder going on in your family or someone close to you. and I know you two are grieving, and I send you my love for that. I know what a hard journey that is. What I had to do to get where I am today, to be able to speak to you like this, was to learn a lot, but the most important thing was to form community, to find other people like me. I started, I've ended up here with this thing I call Marijuana Victims Alliance, and if you didn't see them before, check on a table back there. We had some copies of things like that one you see up there, the paper copies in the back, and pick some of those up, or you can find them on the website. But this particular one, why have marijuana victims been so silent? Why haven't you heard from more people like me? Why did New Hampshire bring me all the way from Arizona? Where are the people in this part of the country speaking like I am? Well, it's an extremely difficult thing for most people to do. Most of us hurt a lot, and it's difficult to do this, and it's taken some learning on my part. But I put on Andy's dog tag and say, Andy, help me go to work today, we're working together. I wear Andy's thumbprint on a heart around my neck, and he's with me and he helps me. I started pretty early on offering myself to do education in my town through the Substance Abuse Coalition. And I did a presentation at the middle school in our town, and we happened to have a reporter from our small town newspaper who did a beautiful article about that. But this is when I learned one of the hardest parts of doing what I do, talking against marijuana, when there's such an enormous number of people that think marijuana is a miracle drug and they love it. And I think I heard from Dr. Madras at one time, she calls it a self-delusional drug, that the users... The most self-delusional drug of all drugs, that the users defend it at all costs. And what I learned very quickly is what social media looks like in the comments, the things that would be said. This one saying that they suspected that I wrote that suicide note before I took his life. Can I read this one to you? I hope that you and everyone who works with you either gets cancer or a terminal illness and dies, or gets into an accident. I hope your family suffers from nothing but traumatic experiences for the rest of their lives, and that they die a slow and agonizing death. I will pray every day that this happens to your family. And there was more, and it was worse. But it ended, yours truly, one of the millions of people who hate you. I'd already been warned that this would happen from the people that were helping me learn to speak, and what they told me is don't read those comments. We now use this marijuana victims serenity prayer. You all know the serenity prayer from 12-step programs. Grant me the serenity to not read those comments, the courage to not read those comments, and the wisdom to not read those comments. That's easier said than done. Actually, what I've taught myself to do is to find those comments to be very amusing. Some are just unbelievable. And then I can also look at some and say, oh my God, that poor person is so sick, and this is what my son meant in his suicide note, marijuana killed my soul. So those comments come from people with no humanity. I've formed community all over the country on email with a lot of people who do kind of similar work to what I do, and one is a group called Parents Opposed to Pot. Parents Opposed to Pot had their website infected with malware. They were taken down for several days. And they put this notice out, we will not be silenced. They just fix that and they go on. And they get these comments daily, just horrible things. Moms Strong is another organization that I'm affiliated with, and my son Andy's story is told on that website. And that's our intent, is help people understand what has been done to the children. There are too many parents that have lost too many children. There are too many parents that are grieving too many children. This is what we call at Mom Strong, our Mom Strong quilt. It's pictures of 22 lives lost. I know the parents of many of these. There's one on there that hurts me the most. I know the mother, Karen Bailey in Florida. Her 2 children are in the light blue down there on the left. Her only 2 children. And they started their drug journey with marijuana. And they didn't die from marijuana. They didn't die similar to my son, but first her son died from a pill overdose. It was just part of his marijuana use, mixing it with pills. And then a couple years later, her daughter died of suicide. Her only 2 children. My heart's broken with my 1 child, and I just can't even imagine when you have 2 and it's your only 2. There were 22 on that Mom Strong quilt. These are child deaths in Arizona that had some association to the drug marijuana. The caregiver or the abuser was a marijuana user, and there were 62 in this year on this report. Similar report out of Colorado, and there are 85 on that report. Similar thing, where there are child deaths, there are children that have died, and marijuana was a part of the equation. This is Parents Opposed to Pot has a report on their website, and actually I printed this a day too early. They updated it after I printed this, and it said that they were categorizing 130 child deaths in, I think that was 33 states. If you look at it today, it's 208 deaths. This is a report out of Colorado, 201 suicide deaths where marijuana was present in the suicide victim. Those are big numbers. They're not, my son is not alone. This is not a small thing. There are too many parents losing too many children. That was 22, 62, 85, 208, 201. And we know there are far, far more than that. Well, I want to ask a couple of things today. I'm going to tell you about my son Andy for a little while. And at the end, I'm going to ask you, help us tell these stories. Help us in the things that we're doing now with Marijuana Victims Alliance, Parents Opposed to Pot, Mom Strong, and other organizations. Help the parents connect with somebody like me and talk with me about, oh my gosh, how'd you learn to do that? I was a scared to death speaker too. Actually, I still am. But
Doing great. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So let me tell you about my son Andy. When Andy was a little boy, he was an awful lot of fun. And when I look at this picture, a story comes to mind when he was a little younger than this, but he came home to me one day, I think he was 5, and he'd been out all day long with his stepdad running errands. And he's all excited about his day, and he's getting ready to tell me about it, but he looked down at his feet and at the cowboy boots he was wearing. He always wore cowboy boots as a little boy. And he looked at the great big t-shirt that he was wearing, and he lifted up his t-shirt and he goes, "Oh, whoopsie, Mom, I forgot to wear pants today." He always amused me. And right after Andy died, I had a spell of going, oh my God, I lost my baby, the baby I used to hold in my arms, the baby that I used to take out of a bathtub and wrap up in a towel and dry him, and then he loved to be set down on the floor and he'd go tearing through the house, running through the house, and we'd all be yelling, "Naked baby, run!" And I'm thinking, I lost it. And then I go, no, I have not lost that. I will not lose my son. I need to find a way to keep my son with me all the time, every day, to work with my son and keep him right here in my heart and right here in this dog tag that I wear. Andy was an amazing young man. He had a lot of goals. He was about the age in this picture when he came running to me one day and he said, Mom, have you ever heard of the Montgomery GI Bill? And I sort of had, but I didn't know what it was. He says, they pay for college. He says, if you just, that college fund you're saving, he said, keep that. I'm not going to use it for college. I'll earn my own college. I'm going in the Army when I get out of high school. He said, save that money for me. I want it later. I want to start a collection of cool cars. So he's a little boy and he's setting big goals, and he was good at his goals. When he was a teenager, he started working and earning money, and he asked me, the financial advisor, how much of my money do I need to save? I want to be a millionaire by the time I'm age 40. And we figured it out, and it was about 5%. So Andy didn't save 5%, he saved 10%. He was 16 years old and he opened an IRA. He had huge goals, big goals, and he was really, really good with money. And this is the first of his collection of cool cars that he bought. He bought that while he was serving in the Army. It's a Monte Carlo. He loved that thing. And he bought that for $9,000 cash. He never had an auto loan. He never made an auto payment. All his life he never did, because he was good with money and he had big goals. Andy joined the Army, and during his senior year of high school, he trained with them that year, and immediately after graduation, he left for boot camp in South Carolina, Fort Jackson. This picture was taken at Fort Jackson, and the date was the day before boot camp graduation. It was called Parents' Day. My husband Greg is down here. He and I were there in South Carolina, or on our way to South Carolina. And we were lucky to be there because the date of this picture was September 12th, 2001. And the airplane stopped flying on September 11th. We spent that day with Andy, and the next day, the graduation. And then the Army told us, I'm sorry, you can't see your children the rest of the week. We have to close the base. The United States has been attacked. We don't know what's going to happen. But Andy, 18 years old, but he knew what he had to do. He knew he needed to pay attention to his training and stay safe, and he did. He chose to join the 82nd Airborne, and he went into paratrooper training, Georgia first, then North Carolina. He was based at Fort Bragg. This was one of their jumps. That's Andy and a whole bunch of soldiers on the ground waiting for the, I think it's a C-130? Yep. And they drop about 60 paratroopers at the same time because they're preparing in case they ever had to be dropped into an active combat zone. They don't want to be up in the air, be on targets. So they drop from about 900 to 1,200 feet with a static parachute. They're on the ground in no time. And he told me that was really cool. See, he's doing things that are really cool and fun for an 18-year-old, jumping out of airplanes. And he was trained to be a mechanic on Humvees. That's cool. He got to drive the Humvees, really enjoying himself. But what he told me he really wanted to do when he got out of the Army was to jump not from 1,200 feet, but from 12,000 feet. So you have to be trained for that too. So when he did get out of the Army, I bought him a gift certificate for our Christmas and birthday one year, and he did get to do that. Look at the big smile on his face. They jumped from 12,000 feet, and because he was a trained paratrooper, he still had to go tandem on that first jump. But they let him do flips and rolls and things and exciting stuff in the air. And I found it too hard to try to show a YouTube video during my PowerPoint, so I'm not showing you the YouTube video, but the video that they got from up in the air is just really amazing. And again, Andy with a huge smile on his face, he's so happy doing that. He was out of the Army at that time. He had, this is his dress uniform picture, and I want to point out one thing in there. On his shoulder is the circle with an AA in it, and AA stands for All American. That's the symbol of the 82nd Airborne. When Andy came home from the Army, he did not have a tattoo on his body. He was a little bit of a contrarian. He didn't want to do all the things that other kids were doing. He told me he wasn't doing drugs either, though I did learn later that he was a daily marijuana user while he was a teenager. But it wasn't something that was apparent to me at the time. He didn't consider it a drug, of course. But that AA on his shoulder there, he decided he took about 2 years out of the Army to make the adult decision. I'm very proud of being a U.S. veteran. I'm proud of the work that we did. And he had that tattooed on his shoulder, the AA All-American, the 82nd Airborne. And about a year later, he had the other shoulder tattooed with the Arizona flag. He had traveled all over the world. He'd traveled all over the United States and decided, I'm Arizona born, I love Arizona, I'll live there the rest of my life. So these were such good years. He was so full of goals and skills, and that's the day he came home from the Army. I was in the airport in Phoenix. He came home feeling mentally healthy and physically healthy. But it was after this year, and maybe a couple of years after this, he was working. He was going to college. He did earn an AA degree, but before he got to that point, he was starting to notice there was something going wrong with his brain. And he told me that he couldn't concentrate, that he'd try to read, he'd try to study, and his mind would go elsewhere. It would go somewhere else. And I had noticed this in Andy too. Sometimes when I was in his company, I'd see that his eyes just dissociated from where he was. It was odd, and it was worrying Andy, it was worrying me. He did start seeing some doctors, but he was an adult. He was around 25 years old by the time this was happening. So he wasn't consulting me, he wasn't living with me. I wasn't seeing it daily, but he started to call suicide helplines starting at age 26, and it started to become evident that there was probably something very serious going on. He called suicide helplines actually a number of times. He was hospitalized in behavioral health hospitals and spit out again after 2 weeks. They do an evaluation. He did have some state-ordered, county-ordered mental health care. But he just kept getting worse and worse until the night that led him to this stage. And this is the picture in the very beautiful cemetery where he is now. This is Phoenix, Arizona. It's a national memorial cemetery. It's huge, and there are thousands of veterans there. And he was cremated, and he's behind a niche cover. He's over toward the upper right there. This is one of the many walls there, and it's 50 wide and it's 3 tall. So there are 150 niches, 150 urns inside these niches. And I actually visit there often. I like to leave flowers there, and I just like to go there and play some music that he liked, or I liked, or we liked together. And one day I read the dates of birth, the years of birth of everybody on that wall, 150 of them, and almost every single one was in the teens, the 20s, or the 30s. And Andy was born in 1982. There's nobody else on that wall born in the 70s or the 80s. Everybody there is old enough to be Andy's grandparent. Andy was only 31 years old. That's way too young to die. Inside, behind that niche cover, before that was put on, I took this picture, and that's his urn inside of there, and that's the photograph I chose to put on it. It was a hike that Andy and I had during a very wonderful period in the year before his death, because Andy was fortunate enough to have been caught with some marijuana and had some law enforcement intervention in his disease of what I now understand to be a severe cannabis use disorder. I read in his doctor's reports. Because he was arrested, he was able to go to drug court and volunteer. In Arizona, they give you 3 chances to do this. Be drug tested, just be drug free, and go to some programs and learn something about your disease. And that was such a wonderful period for us, because we could talk and communicate together, repair a relationship that had been broken during those hard years. So it was a wonderful day, a wonderful hike. And you notice Andy's dog in the picture? I'm going to tell you a little bit about that dog in a minute. Andy told me his dog, his name is Tritium. Tritium saved his life many times. He told me that he'd put a gun to his head several times, and Tritium would stop him from doing that. Also in this picture is a cap that Andy was wearing, and on that cap he had sewn on one of those AA circles, his All-American, proud of his U.S. veteran status. One thing a parent or family member or somebody has to do after a death and before a burial, before a cremation, is decide what they'll be wearing. And I put that cap on Andy. Andy was wearing that cap, and we had a viewing the day before, and Andy's body was in the casket, and he was wearing that cap, and some clothing I chose for him, and I was lucky to have my husband with me that day because he kept his hand on my back, which kept me from climbing right into that casket with him. But I got to hug him, and I learned I'd never hugged a dead body before, and I learned that they're very cold. And I held Andy's hands trying to warm them up. They can't be warmed up. It was tough time, but I thought it was important to him to have that picture. I put a number of pictures into his pocket before his cremation, so those are in ashes too, in that urn, in that niche, in that cemetery. I do not want to dwell at points like this that are sad for me and sad for other people here, so I want to tell you a happy story, because I expect I have animal lovers in the audience. And Andy's dog Tridium was taken in by a friend of a friend, and Tridium's still living, and he's had a happy life. It's been very good. He's a very old dog now. You see his gray whiskers, and the friend brings him to see me every now and then. So I saw him last summer and got this picture. Tridium is an old dog, and Tridium has cancer now, so Tridium's in his last days, but the happy thing is Tridium and Andy will be rejoined soon, and I just like to think of that happy picture. Andy was a happy guy and a fun guy. This was at a family reunion when we were all doing karaoke, and he chose to sing Garth Brooks' "I'm much too young to feel this damn old." You know, had we foreseen what that could have meant. Andy was funny, and he was fun. He could walk into a room and light up a party. He loved animals. He always had guinea pigs and rats and his dog and houseplants. He loved taking care of things. He loved helping others. Now I want to ask some things of some of you because of this problem we have. We have too many parents losing too many children. And I'm really happy that here today they're giving away some of these books. Alex Berenson's book. And if there's anybody in the room who has not heard of him yet, learn about him quickly. And please, please, please read this book. Well, one of the things Alex Berenson said in a recent interview is that there are too many parents losing too many children. And they're not going to give up, and they're not going to rest until the industry pays for what it is doing. So I'm asking all of you, do your part in that. Help the parents tell these stories. Help the bishop tell these stories. There are those of you familiar with 12-step programs. I'm a long-term Al-Anon, and I've used these 3 C's for years that I didn't cause, can't cure, can't control the disease of substance use disorder, and it's the same thing is true of grief. It can't be controlled or cured, but what we can do is we can create community, and I'm inviting you all to be a part of this community. These organizations, Marijuana Victims Alliance, Parents Opposed to Pot, Moms Strong, we are trying to get these stories out there. We talk to people every day, another family who's lost another child or who has a child lost in the disease of substance use disorder, marijuana use disorder. But what we know from having worked on this for so many years is it's very, very difficult to help a parent, a family member through the grieving process, to learn to testify in front of a legislative committee where you may have 1 minute to talk. How do I tell my story in 1 minute? So we try to teach this, we try to help people do this. We need more stories. We don't get anywhere near the number of contacts we think we should be getting. We know there are more out there, they just don't know about us yet. Help us spread the word that these organizations exist. There are others. There's a wonderful, wonderful marijuana report put out every week, a newsletter every week. Please subscribe to that. They have such good information. That's put out by Georgia's National Families in Action, and they're in partnership with SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana. Read that report, subscribe to it. The organization, I think in my bio, it was at the time called Citizens Against Legalizing Marijuana. They've changed their name since to Americans Against Legalizing Marijuana. And they are working to educate legislators, to educate, probably most importantly, they're the only organization I know doing this. They're educating lawyers. They're educating attorneys. Don't be afraid of the marijuana industry. They are doing so many things that are so wrong. They are causing so many victims, so much harm. The lawyers have got to help the victims get the restitution that they deserve. Don't try to read that page there. It's printed, it's in the back, or I'll get you one. But those are just the citations of some of the numbers I used in the websites that I've just mentioned. These are the organizations I'm very, very close to. Pot is not healthy for children and other living things. You might remember this poster from, I think it was back in the 70s, maybe war is not healthy and pot is not healthy. And I'm going to try to play you a little video. You'll see it's a little bit fuzzy because it was made for social media, so the pictures are kind of small and they get blown up big. They'll be a little fuzzy, but just think of it as you're looking at my son Andy in heaven. We cannot be silent. Too many parents are losing too many children. We need you to hear us now. Can you see us now? And will you help us now? Because silence can be complicity. And complicity in allowing or accepting this promotion of drug use cannot be accepted. And I will not be complicit. Thank you so much for listening to me today. I'm okay with questions if I have some. Yes?
I have a question. Have you had any interest in encouraging people to collect better data on this? There seems to be an awful lot of people who are affected by suicide, but we're not teasing that out. We seem to be using old methods prior to all the data ability that we have with our electronic data collection systems. I don't understand why coroners and other individuals can't expand this data.
The question is, can we get better data on something like suicides? And gosh, I wish we could, and I have said things to people. When I received the coroner's report after Andy's death, they reported no drugs, no illicit drugs whatsoever Some alcohol, yes, he had used a a small pint bottle of rum to gain some courage. But there was no marijuana, and I knew he had marijuana in his system because just a day or two before that, he had me witness him flushing some marijuana. He said, I can't quit, I buy it and I use it and I flush the remainder because I'm going to quit. And the next day I go out and buy it again. So I had seen it in his possession, but it didn't show up in the coroner's report. So I called them, and this is Maricopa County in Arizona, and each coroner is different in each county, I understand. They said, well, we don't test for marijuana after a suicide. And I said, oh my gosh, how could you not test? Don't you need to know that? And they go, oh no, we don't need to know that because marijuana can't kill anybody. And I told them, no, you do need to know that because marijuana can induce a suicide. And I have since contacted them again and asked them, escalate my call, escalate my plea, and please start testing because I know some other counties in Arizona do. I don't know where it stands today. It's too far down on the to-do list right now, but I will keep working on that in Arizona. I recently heard from a friend in California that he doesn't think anywhere in California knows after a suicide if marijuana was one of the substances. They don't report it. Thank goodness Colorado does report on it. There are some that do and there are some that don't. And we as citizens, I think we can all be insisting on that, something like that, improve the data that we have. Any other questions? Let's move the day along.